That was a fun question that came to me. I'm Stan Houston. This is the Jesus Entrepreneur Experience, coming your way from the Christian Entrepreneur Network. That's what I wondered. Did the Wall Street Journal steal that from me? Could that have happened? And is it true that perhaps I actually invented the podcast many, many years ago? Well, those are two things I'd just like to think about me and perhaps you, and together, maybe there's some things that we can learn together that would be helpful and useful for us. That's what this is all about, so that you can be more fully alive, build a life and a business that matters and makes a difference. That 15 to 20 minutes, whenever we can get around to it, goes and starts right now. One of my friends the other day said, what is the ideal length for a podcast? Should it be 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 hour, 3 hours? There actually is a guy who has a 6-hour podcast. I have not listened to it, but I listened to the first few minutes of it. Now, I guess it was pretty good, but I'm not so sure I could make it for 6 full hours. It was a history podcast, and I like history, but 6 full hours. Well, we're going to be talking more about that because as I challenged you, this is a time this summer to actually ask, are we serious? And one of the things I asked you to think about is, hey, should it be time for you to take it seriously in terms of finding out whether an audio content program or what some people call a podcast? By the way, we call it an iPod radio broadcast. An iPod radio broadcast, and someday we'll tell you more about why we take a different name to it. But during this time, we're trying to figure out, can we use this time when some people are kind of sloughing off and summering it? Could we make this 90 days, this summertime, a time where we are very serious and make some serious and purposeful and significant changes in the life and business that is before us? Maybe it'll be a summer indeed to remember. Well, let me begin with my first question. Did they steal from me? Well, I've been stolen from, not a great deal, but oftentimes, I have gotten a note from somebody who said, Stan, this is your stuff. And yeah, it is. There have been people who've taken some of my ideas and my articles and my books and things like that, and they have pretty much plagiarized them and kind of made them their own. And you just have to kind of say, well, that's the way the world works. Plagiarism and piracy and a little petty thievery in terms of intellectual property happens all the time, and you just simply have to say is, well, I hope it helps somebody. And sometimes you just smile and say, well, I guess imitation is a bit of a compliment. They at least thought it was good enough to steal and take advantage of. So I guess we can work with that. But here's what happened. I have worked for some time trying to come up with what I call the I words that may give a step-by-step way of thinking about your business. Business is having mental models and mental mindsets that you can then put into action. Nothing happens until somebody has an idea. And perhaps that idea has to come from something that would be ideal or something they would even idolize. Could that be? Well, as a result of that, I have done some I words. And just recently, like a day ago, I got an email from the Wall Street Journal, and this is how they headlined their pitch for a subscription. They said, do you want insight? Do you want impact? Do you want influence? Insight, impact, and influence. Now, when I saw that, I said, did they take that from some of my stuff? Well, please keep in mind they probably didn't. Because remember, any good idea, somebody else can have it too. But let me just tell you what I have done. And all I'm going to ask you to do is, if you care about thinking rightly about your business, you might want to eventually have some teaching, some coaching, because this can be very, very vital, on these are the 9 entrepreneurial I words. Let me just kind of send them by you, and we can make it more specific in a less intense session some other time. Ideal. You have to have some ideals. From that, an idea. From an idea, you can begin to gain some insight. From that insight, you're going to have to ask some questions. So the 4th stage is inquiry. So you got that so far? Ideal, idea, insight, inquiry. Now somebody has to start acting upon it. All of that stuff, somebody has to incarnate. That means you give it a body, you give it a person, it actually walks, talks, breathes, and speaks. Somebody lives it, proclaims it, speaks it. Then that incarnation of the idea and insight may lead to influence. People begin to pay attention. They listen. They may even be persuaded by it. And then your influence may actually make a difference. It'll be impacted. And then, if you get it right, maybe that impact will lead to some income. And income is not just money. It is the incoming things you want in your life. And then you may invite other people to participate in the idea and even in the income. So it's ideal, idea, insight, inquiry, incarnation, influence, impact, income, and invitation. And I know, because I teach this is radio, so you don't have a chance to write them down, and I'm not expecting you to read them or look at them right now. Just let them sit on your head for a while you're driving somewhere, or you're just kind of listening a little bit. But let me assure you of this. I think they can be very, very useful to you. I'm Stan Houston. We're into about 8 minutes. Thank you for your time. You're listening to the Jesus Entrepreneur Experience. This is a program, about 20 minutes, sometimes less, not much more, to say this is true. Jesus of Nazareth was a master entrepreneur, and he invented many things and created many things. And we can live a life modeled on ways and principles and practices and relationships that he had. So if you want to be a successful person, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you will try and model your life after the master entrepreneur. You will try to have a Jesus entrepreneur life and business experience. And we try and take 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes 5 times a week, about 15 to 20 minutes, just to think about that and talk about that. There we go. Thank you for taking time to think about that. tcenglobal.org/contribute now. I would be grateful if this has been helpful. tcenglobal.org/contribute now. We've got a couple other things to mention, and I think they'll be worthwhile. So take a break, just a short one, and we'll be back. no one stole this from me. But I may have been one of the first to do it. Now, by the way, some of you may have heard my story that a group of us a number of years ago came up with an idea called an e-book. And we let Amazon know about it, and they thought it was a good idea. And then they told us it was a terrible idea, and they shut it down, and we lost the business, and the little e-book business we had died out and never happened. Of course, 6 months later, a tablet was created by Amazon, and all of a sudden the e-books came back. Of course, we were completely out of the picture and out of the story and out of the profits by that time. And Jeff Bezos and his gang of good guys at Amazon have done quite well. So that's just kind of one of the things that might have happened. However, this wasn't stolen from me, but I've been one of the first people to kind of embrace the idea of podcasting. Not the first, but I started to try it quite early. And little bit could be this way, because there's two things I did. First of all, as a business performance coach, I found out that people really didn't want to have a written memo that they had to read based on our meetings. So since I was a radio broadcaster and had had quite a career at that, sitting there on my desk was a Marantz cassette tape recorder. And it was one of the high-quality ones because it was used primarily in news reporting recording. And so you'd carry this around with you and you would interview people. And then you would take that cassette and that good recorder back to the studio, and then you'd download that, copy it on reel-to-reel tape, and you would go to all of the splicing work to make a newscast or a news program from that. Well, it was sitting there, and so I said, why don't I do an oral report? After all, I'm a better talker than a typist, by far. And what I did is I got a whole bunch. I think I spent about $1, maybe 70 cents for them. And they were just little 10-minute cassettes, not 30-minute, not 60, not 90 or 120, just 10 minutes. And they were fine. And what I did is I got a music stand, I got a microphone, and when I would come back from a program, what I would do with my client, I would take a few thoughts, put some notes together, and I would make a little 10-minute audio program just for them. Just me talking to them, giving them some reminders, some coaching, and some counsel about our meeting. And it was just 10 minutes. And I'd put it in an envelope and ship it off to them. They loved it. First of all, keep in mind that most entrepreneurs and people in business are busy, and particularly if they're entrepreneurs, many of them are dyslexic. They can't read real well. So they loved to hear it. The energy, the personality. I could laugh, I could make fun. And it was very personal. And as one guy said, what I do is I actually just listen to it in my car. And I have it, and nobody else is going to hear it. Nobody else is going to read a memo. And I can then pick up my phone and call Stan back and make some comments and some conversation about the little 10-minute audio postcard in a little cassette that I had sent them. We did that, and it worked great. And I've oftentimes thought maybe that's a podcast. But something else. Her name was Deb, and Deb was one of my first clients who wanted to be very different. And what I suggested to her is she built her business because I taught her how to create audio cassettes to hand out to clients. And they were helpful and useful, and that was a significant part of her marketing. Well, then she got the idea, yes, I can pass those out, but I've got all these people on my mailing list. And here's what we did. We actually would go into the studio, and she and I would create usually a 20 to 30-minute little audio program. And she was quite good, and of course I was a radio guy, and we would talk back and forth, and it would be all kinds of fun and good stuff, and all of it related to the subject of long-term care insurance that would be helpful to people who were in that business and people who had those concerns. Worked great. And then when those things were made up, we would literally go through the work of taking, sometimes there were 1,000 of them, we would put them in packages and we'd mail them off. I mean, it was a considerable investment and expense. But the more I think about it, that was kind of a podcast. So maybe in some ways, the personal podcast, I still call that the personal audio note or the personal postcard, and perhaps that cassette was the first real podcast. I don't know. What do you think? All of those are meant to give you some ideas as to some of the things you might now do in your business. What if you had me as a coach at that time, or you had me as a coach right now, and I would suggest that you do the same thing for your clients, for your customers, for the people you want to have influence on so that you can impact them, so you can get some income from them. Think about that. Final note. I asked you to remember that we were thinking about the Pentecost event. Certainly a part of the Christian tradition, but I am absolutely convinced that it is vital to you as a businessman or woman. And so what I'd like you to do is remember something that you may have learned some time ago. The Holy Spirit of God roared into action, came with fire and light and a power into the world. And they said, I'm yours. You can have spiritual force, the SFX. You can have a spiritual force experience. And if you do, there will be 9 significant differences in you. Yes, 9 quality differences in you and your life. In fact, the word that was used is fruits, spiritual fruits, spiritual forces, spiritual force experience, spiritual fruits. And there are 9 of them, and I'm going to call them the quality differences. I think I'll take some time this weekend to think about that and ask you, particularly those of you who are serious about this kind of personal and professional and spiritual growth, to go to the book of Galatians, the letter of Galatians, chapter 5, and start around verse 21, 22, and read through those quality differences. And just maybe next week, I'll share with you some long time thinking, praying, and research about each of those quality differences and how they might work for you in your business. I'm Stan Houston. This is the Jesus Entrepreneur Experience. Again, we just barely made it, but we did make it under 20 minutes. I'd love to hear from you. Please check us out, tcenglobal.org, tcenglobal.org, if you want to be helpful to me, tcenglobal.org/contribute now. We could use a little bit of your donation and support right now, and perhaps what you might call it sponsorship. We can talk about that. RadioEdge77@gmail.com, RadioEdge77@gmail.com. If you have any ideas or any questions to ask, or perhaps you want to raise your hand and say, can you help me? Or perhaps you want to raise your hand and say, Stan, I can help you, so we can help each other. May the weekend be best and blessed for you. Until we come again, I'm Stan Houston. Bye for now.